Hi,
Hello.
can you guys hear me?
Great. In fact, here we are. So, well, good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to our Chartered Body Alliance webcast on closing the skills gap, or should I say skills gaps in financial services. So over the next sort of 50 minutes or so, we'll be looking at the future of skills for financial services in general, including how the work of the UK's new Financial Services Commission, which works alongside policymakers, financial services organisations, professional bodies like our own and others, can help to close those skills gaps in UK financial services. And of course, we'll have to define just what and where we think those gaps might be, and also think about how our position compares with those of our global peers and competitors. I hope we'll be able to consider this from a variety of perspectives, including banking, insurance, other parts of financial services, and also bring in aspects of how other sectors and other countries are tackling some of those challenges. Whilst much of the work of the Commission itself focused on digital skills, I also hope we can broaden our discussion to include skills needed to support our post-pandemic recovery, and a particular interest of mine, the green and sustainable finance skills to support a more socially just building back better approach. I'm Simon Thompson. I'm Chief Executive of the Chartered Banker Institute, and I was a member of the Financial Services Skills Task Force that established the Commission I mentioned a moment ago. And we've added a copy of the task force report to this Bright Talk channel that's available to download for anyone who's interested now or after. I'm delighted to be joined this afternoon by three expert and themselves all highly skilled professionals and practitioners. We're joined by Claire Tunnelly, who's the Chief Executive of the Financial Services Skills Commission, and Claire was previously Head of Skills Policy for the City of London. Hello, Claire. Tanuj Kapilashwamy, the Group Head of Human Resources at Standard Chartered Bank. She joined Standard Chartered in 2017 after a long career with HSBC, and I know you've worked in many of the locations, Hong Kong, Singapore, India and the Gulf, that I think we might be looking to in terms of inspiration, ideas and other approaches. Hello, good afternoon.
Hello.
And finally by Sian Fisher, Chief Executive of the Chartered Insurance Institute and a fellow member of the Financial Services Skills Task Force. Hi, Sian.
Hi.
Yeah. So could I begin as an icebreaker just by asking each of our panelists to tell us a little bit about a skill they have developed themselves over, I think it's the past 16 weeks now or so of lockdown learning. So Claire, what skill or skills have you developed in recent weeks?
Mine have been very, very related to homeschooling and child learning, and they have all been digital. So on the first day of lockdown, we set a coronavirus fun list, and the children said they wanted to learn how to do stop motion animation, and they wanted to do videos where you can sort of put captions and edit and things. So we've actually done that, and I've learned a lot. We've had a lot of fun doing stop motion animation with Lego. So yeah, those are my skills.
Well, if only we'd known, we perhaps could have commissioned you to do this via Lego instead, and that would have been great fun for us.
I didn't say I was any good at it.
Great. Well, Tanuj, any time to invest in new skills and development?
You know, I have, very similar to Claire, I've gone on record to say that I'm a slightly better HR professional than I would ever be a primary school teacher. So that's been my learning over the lockdown period, trying to unsuccessfully homeschool my daughter. But one of the things that I did do was become a member of our Data and Analytics Academy, which is in StanChart, one of the future skills we speak about. And I have taken the time out to get some of our internal sort of accreditation and courses. It's just an area that I was fascinated by, and lack of travel has meant that I've been able to do a bit of that, which has been good.
Okay, and it's great to be able to use your own learning resources as well. I mean, I've been exploring our own institute's learning resources and was amazed at how much we had on offer as well to take advantage of.
Absolutely.
Yeah, so and Sian, yourself, have you explored CI resources a little bit more, or any other skills you developed outside of the professional and practitioner world?
Well, it's been quite interesting because I suppose a byproduct of the current scenario that everybody's been massively experiencing, I think, is obviously the whole video conferencing situation. But and we at the CII we predominantly use Teams as our, Microsoft Teams is our particular product. But why that's kind of come to the fore for me, not just for work, but is also so I'm actually living with my parents at the moment, and my darling mummy is living with dementia. So one of the things actually that's been a huge learning for me is what it means to actually run a household, because I've always lived on my own, and I suppose I've been in reasonably senior positions for years and years. So I've always had somebody to look after the house, and I can't remember the last time I went shopping, and all of this stuff. So, but what that's shown me is that then you can get to feel very isolated very quickly, because everything is so busy, but it's all concentrated within four walls, and it's got such a routine to it. The washing up, the ironing, and so suddenly to have this ability to actually access all these friends around the world that I haven't spoken to for years, as a complete byproduct of what I've learned for work, has been amazing, really, and it untaps your ability to talk to multiple people at the same time, which has been I've really loved that.
Great, thank you. As of many others, I think in lockdown, a phrase I've heard a lot is that although we're further apart, many people have been brought closer together in many ways by all of this, professionally and personally too. Great. Well, then turning to the subject at hand, in our in the Financial Services Skills Task Force report published at the beginning of the year, we highlighted that the current and past successes of our sector depended to a great extent on the skills of our workforce, and ultimately that's what provided UK financial services, and I guess you could extend this to any successful financial services centre, with our competitive advantage. I think in the UK's case, over quite a sustained period. I think that continued success, though, is under pressure from a number of global mega trends. The task force identified three in particular: demographics, data, and technology. And despite recent events, globalization as well. These are having a very profound effect on financial services, disrupting traditional business models, and are also having a major impact on current and future generations of colleagues. New approaches to skills development will be needed in terms of attracting, retaining, developing, reskilling and upskilling to close the skills gap. But that begs the question, what is the skills gap or skills gap that we hear so much about? Which skills, what gaps, and with whom? So Claire, as the chief executive of the commission, who is charged with taking the work of the task force forward, what do you see as the skills gaps, and with whom are those gaps?
Yes, thanks, Simon. It's broad, and the work that we completed with the task force last year covered the whole of financial services across the UK. And the data on skills gaps comes from government surveys of businesses, really where they've got challenges around recruitment, and also people in roles who are not fully equipped to do those roles, or not fully skilled. And I think it's important to say at the beginning, when we mention skills, this is not just technical knowledge. We talk about knowledge, behaviours and skills. So it's not just can you code or do you understand coding, it's have you got the capabilities and those softer skills to enable you to use that. So I think that's a kind of caveat. I use skills, but it's shorthand for knowledge, skills and behaviours. And when we did the task force work, we found that financial services was one of only two sectors where skills gaps have been increasing. And this is employers reporting this data to government, and that's actually grown quite a lot. And when we're looking for sort of the next phase of that government data to come out later on this year, hopefully. And what we heard from businesses when we explored this was largely around digital and tech. It is largely around those skills. That there is a very big skills gap in leadership and management expertise. And again, that's less about knowledge, that's more about capabilities and behaviours, and a little bit about experience. And there are some gaps in areas such as compliance and risk, but they're not as great. But I think it's important to say that what we heard in the task force was less about I need X number of cloud experts or X number of data analysts, which certainly are in demand. It was much more fundamental of an augmentation of everyone's job role in the sector that is slowly happening over time. So the robots aren't coming to automate and take all our jobs tomorrow, but they will evolve what you need to do in each job functional area, and that'll then require an evolved skill set. So it was very much that it was a movement, an ongoing evolution of skills that we need people to have in their job roles, rather than a stop-start of robots are coming, if you like.
No, thanks. I think that raises a lot of points I hope we'll kind of get into later, particularly about, and I think sometimes in the debates we have about skills, we're always focused on skills for new entrants to the workforce as well, whereas you absolutely make the point this is about augmenting current skills. I have to say, I think actually I much prefer that augmenting phrase rather than upskilling, which I find is a rather an ugly portmanteau of a term. So I'm going to try and use augmented skills rather than upskilling from now on. Coming from a very global institution, does kind of what Claire's talked about from a UK perspective, does that mirror your experience at sort of Standard Chartered and that of your colleagues in the many markets sort of where you operate?
Thank you. And I am going to start augmenting using augmenting instead of upskilling as well. So thank you for that, Claire. But a lot of what Claire says absolutely resonates with our experience. And particularly the point that Claire makes around not just buying the new skills or the amount of proficiency that's needed in specialist verticals. Our research that we did it both on the basis of job families. So we looked at sort of job families that will, over the next sort of 5 to 10 years, require very different skills, including job families that we feel will disappear in the way that they are constructed today, and new jobs that will come up. So we've done quite a bit of that work, which led to us articulating 10 future skills that will be needed for the future of our business. And again, to add to what Claire said, in our case, it's a balance between technical and human skills. So when we talk about the 10 future skills, we give equal weightage to technical and human skills. And the way we are rolling out what we call our reskilling, upskilling agenda is really around going deep in areas where there is the specialization, but actually thinking of something for everyone in the company. So how do we get a basic level of digital awareness, digital skills for 100,000 colleagues in the company across 60 markets? And what does that mean? Even if we don't want everyone to be a coder, but we want them to be equipped to be able to deal with our clients in a very, very different way and deal with each other in a very different way. So this idea that future skills is not only if you are in the technology function or you're in a front office client service function, it's actually for everyone in the company, and being able to design constructs accordingly.
And what do you, it's always something that's intrigued me. What do you define as a basic level of digital and technology kind of skill and competence? Is it just being able to use Microsoft Office and to be able to, well, these days use Zoom and Teams, or is it a little bit more than that?
It is a little bit more than that. So the way we did it is, a very simple app which you can have on your iPhone, which actually is a digital fitment test. We set everyone in the company, from the CEO to frontline. Very simple. It's just basics around blockchain, blockchain technology, some very simple digital applications. What do they mean? And our starting position was everyone in the company doing a digital fit assessment, which then starts directing them to resources or modules or learning pathways around areas where they perhaps don't know enough about. So, for us, it's not basic transaction with technology. It is actually understanding APIs, understanding blockchain, not from an integration of API perspective, but just understanding what they do, how they sit in our systems, why are they important for our clients, why are our clients looking for greater API integration. So those are the areas that we have got into. And then depending on your role, the opportunities that you have to get scaled obviously vary, and we've got a 4-level sort of accreditation framework.
Yeah. And are there any examples of kind of regions or countries that you see from your global perspective who maybe are ahead of us in the way that the skills system within the country supports individuals and potentially employers too in kind of gaining or augmenting these sorts of skills? Because when this is the challenge for Claire and the Commission, there's a sense in which perhaps we feel we need to be catching up in the UK a little bit.
I mean, and I know Claire is and the whole Commission is actually very well plugged into it. I actually believe in a few countries. Singapore comes to mind. We speak about Singapore quite a bit, where I do believe the government has taken quite a proactive role in outlining a framework that companies can use around the whole sort of reskilling workforce agenda. So I think there are some examples, and Singapore is always sort of top of the mind for me. Hong Kong's beginning to do some really interesting things, again, in the fintech space. Singapore, some of the work they're doing in green finance, for example, I find quite encouraging. We do find bodies like NASSCOM in India are getting into partnerships with the government to do much more of a digital upskilling agenda. So I think there are pockets. Do I believe that there are countries that are significantly more advanced, where the workforce is significantly more advanced than perhaps where we are in the UK? I don't see that. I think there are some pockets of excellence, but I do believe that this is a global challenge. This gap between education and employability in terms of sort of skills is a global challenge.
I'd agree. I think we can beat ourselves up a little bit too much sometimes about this and assume that every country, whether it's sort of Germany is so far ahead on vocational education for teenagers, or Scandinavian countries are so far ahead on schools education. And I think the truth is far more nuanced, I think. Sian, to come to you for I mean, I know you've got some strong views on how financial services remains very product focused rather than customer focused, and that has implications for the future skills that we need, particularly if we're, as we are, probably accelerating the rollout of digital products and services and digital customer journeys and so on. Could you maybe tell us a little about your thoughts around that and share with us what you feel this means for skills and knowledge and behaviour in our sector?
Yes, I mean, if I just give a little bit of background as to where this has come from, because I've worked in the insurance sector my whole career, and I was an insurance underwriter, so I was very much sort of product focused, if you like. But we started quite a big research project about 5 years ago, which was looking at the differences between the life journey that men on the whole have and women have. And it wasn't trying to say anything was right or wrong, but it was just trying to get at the differences, what that leads to. And we sort of approached it like a risk assessment, I suppose, on life. And we correlated the male and female data along the way. And of course, the outcome was that women are significantly less financially resilient during their life, but particularly at the end of their life, than men are. So that was, I suppose, not completely surprising given the historical journey that women are on, but it was much worse than we had anticipated. So that caused us to go back and look at the risk assessment, if you like, but then also to say what kind of interventions could happen along the way that might preempt what we tend to call vulnerability. I mean, the truth is we're all vulnerable certainly vulnerable to making decisions when we don't know what we're doing, or secondly, we think we know what we're doing, but we haven't got the right information. And so when we went back and looked at, we call them the 6 moments that matter, but when we went back and looked at the interventions, you realize that so much of that is about engagement. and about the financial services sector sharing the knowledge it's got about what matters and what can really make a difference, as opposed to sort of reaching behind itself and getting off the shelf in a slightly bored way, you know, something that kind of plonks down on the counter and saying, without much explanation, sort of saying, this is what, you know, this is what you need, buy this and it will be fine. And it's very interesting that a lot of the dialogue around, say, AI or around you know, the digital skills agenda is almost about, you know, how do we get rid of people? And it seems we're trying to get rid of people before we've actually even identified how this life journey really needs to interact with financial services. So we need to, you know, up the humanization of what we're doing, rather than actually trying to get rid of the humanization side of it. And it does seem that, you know, AI and other tools could be massively beneficial in terms of, you know, getting information out, picking the right information to give people at times, as opposed to trying to eradicate the, you know, the genuine human bit at the front, which is really looking at the customer and saying, why is this person coming to us? What is it they really need help with? And where are they on this kind of life journey? And how do I best equip them today for the things that could then happen to them in the future? And you know, that seems to be a massively human skill that you know, we can very much upskill people to think about their financial services career in that way, you know, using then digital and AI, not actually being fearful of the fact that it's actually going to, you know, get rid of them, their job.
Claire, I noticed you were nodding sort of strongly throughout that. It sounds like you probably in strong agreement with Sian on that.
No, absolutely. And I think, you know, AI is a tool. It's, you know, companies are having to think about cost and business models, but AI is a huge tool, but it is a tool to connect with humans. And I think there's a massive opportunity to almost democratize access and financial products, etc., which, you know, maybe hasn't been done in the past. And I know one of our members, Profile Pensions, is a small fintech looking to open up the you know, the pensions market, because people don't understand it and they want to democratize that and make it much clearer. And I'm struck by an example which I think illustrates what Sian was getting at really, really well. And it's from Zurich, the big insurer, and they have been looking at automation in their claims handling process, as any big insurer would look at. And initially, they won't mind me saying that they brought in automation specialists to look at that and bring AI into those processes. It didn't work. They didn't happen very well because the AI specialists, very good, didn't understand the claims handling process and how customers interacted with that and how the regulation fitted in. So what they did then is they took some of the claims handling team, and to be fair, you know, those jobs are going to reduce in the future. So those individuals are potentially at risk from redundancy as the numbers were going to reduce. But they retrained over a period of 12 weeks those individuals in automation, not to become the kind of back-end developer, but understand the processes. And they are perfectly then placed to help Zurich design the automated processes for their claims handling, because they knew how customers interacted with claims, where you could automate a process and where it wouldn't work, and what the customer journey was. And so now that's been so successful that Zurich only recruit automation specialists from their claims handling team now. And I think that's a really good example of bringing that human understanding of how humans interact with our financial products and our systems and processes with automation, and being able to get a better result for everybody as at the end of it.
That's a great example. It's not one I'd heard before, but it sort of fits with the lessons of history that technology doesn't mean we get rid of people overall. It means the jobs people do change.
Yeah. And it's also, I think, Simon, I don't know if the etiquette allows me to interject, but I was just going to say to, you know, from what Claire's just been saying is, I mean, the other thing with financial services is we know there's a massive gap. There's a massive, well, certainly in insurance. I mustn't talk about banking because obviously I don't understand as much about that, but I would imagine it's not that dissimilar. I mean, in insurance, there is a massive protection gap. I mean, even though we are, as a country, relatively advanced in terms of the penetration of protection products and risk-based products, the penetration is tiny. I mean, there's a very small number of people relatively even buy, contents insurance for their houses. And, most people wouldn't buy, even to protect their biggest financial asset, their property. Most people probably wouldn't buy the insurance if it wasn't for the mortgage companies kind of forcing them to do it. And of course, if people don't engage with financial services, it's, if people don't buy a pension, if people don't buy life insurance, if they don't, the problem is all of that residual, because life is a risky business, so bad things will happen, but all of that residual risk then essentially falls on society, particularly where you have a welfare based society like we do. So anything that can be done to expand the level of interaction. We've got 73 million people in this country, and I don't know how many bankers there are left, but in financial planning, which we obviously cover as well, there are only about 30,000 properly qualified or regulated qualified financial planners in the country for 73 million people, right? So any way in which you can upskill people and technology to address this massive gap, it seems like a massive, commercial opportunity for financial services.
Mm. And do you think, I think, so Sian, you touched on or you did more than touch on the point around individuals who are vulnerable or who are presenting with complex financial needs, whether that's in a banking context or an investment context or an insurance context. I mean, I think sadly, that's going to be, there's going to be more individuals and more businesses in those categories as we come out of the other side of the pandemic and we go through an economic recovery phase. And it does seem to me that yes, while the acceleration of digital, the adoption of digital channels in financial services means that there may be some roles reduced. The roles that remain and new roles will need to be very highly skilled in terms of not just technical financial services skills, but the communication, the collaboration, the empathy, and so on that's needed. And that is at the moment still impossible to, or virtually impossible to recreate through chatbots and other forms of automation. I mean, is that a thesis my panelists would agree with, that we might be seeing a kind of a bifurcation here, that some roles will be very heavily automated, but roles that remain will actually be more highly skilled than before? Maybe Tanush, could I come to you first on that?
Thank you. Just a few things first. I think both Claire and Sian spoke about the role of AI and actually how it helps us becoming more client-centric and actually helping us increase that human interface. There are many parallels of that analogy when it comes to employees as well, right? And one of the things that we are finding is using AI helps us democratize development opportunity, and it helps us be able to deploy the skilling agenda at scale. And as opposed to in the past, which was all driven by your line manager nominating you, classroom-based training, suddenly the world's changed. I mean, we have deployed a new learning platform which is purely AI enabled. So it operates a bit like Netflix, depending on what you consume and what your interests are, pieces of content get directed to you, and it sort of gamifies it. So in some ways, it's not pushed from the organizations, pulled from individuals. So I think it's important to really talk about the power of AI in terms of engaging with our workforce as well. So that's sort of one point. The second thing is, I actually believe there are processes which are going to be automated and digitized, not full jobs. And it's a point that I speak about a lot, right? If you take a job, there are bits of it that are prone to full automation, full digitization, but it creates loads of other opportunities as well. For us, when I spoke about the 10 future skills, one of the skills that we've pushed to a lot is new ways of working. So this idea that if you are completely, the Zurich example that Claire makes, if you are a process expert and we can train you on human-centered design, which is the methodology that we are using, you actually become a really powerful ally of the technocrats in designing solutions. Because without thinking through human-centered design, the heart of which is agile collaboration, without having that skill set in the company, you can't deploy and design technology solutions which are really client-centric. So what we have found is new ways of working has been a skill set, and it's a broad banner. We are doing A3s, we are doing agile, and we are doing human-centered design. The take-up of that, of colleagues who've been in the organization for many years, traditional bankers, but have deep client and product expertise, is massive. And it gives us the opportunity to really offer them alternate and diverse sort of career paths. So AI for employees as powerful as AI for customers. And new ways of working, especially this idea of human-centered design, is very powerful to complement with technology. And the third thing is we should stop talking about full jobs being automated. We should talk about full roles. We should talk about tasks being automated. And if you break it down into tasks, I think it means loads of new opportunities for our colleagues.
And in fact, that I'd had a question sent to me in advance, which kind of links to that last point, really. So it's probably a good point to ask it. I'm kind of paraphrasing, but it was basically, have we in the past, and perhaps are we still now, do we have too much of a focus on training and preparing individuals for a specific role, and that role is therefore just a list of tasks that you do. And actually, this goes right back to, when we're telling people about careers in financial services, we say, this is the entry level role and this is what you do. And then, you do that for 3 years and you take some training and then you're prepared for the next role and the next role and the next role. Is that something that we in the Commission need to very much rethink? That we know roles are going to change and careers are going to change. I think, we when we did look at it with the task force, we're predicting kind of at least 7 significant role/career changes throughout people's careers. Those careers are going to be ever longer working lives and so on. And we have no idea what the world of work will look like in 30, 40 or 50 years time. Let's be quite clear. We all like to think we can predict, but we don't. I mean, it looks very different now from what it did 50 years ago. So that's a long way around just of saying, actually, do we need to fundamentally rethink this idea of training people for roles? Actually, is it about we train people with the skills they need and with the meta skills they need to be able to fulfill any role?
So I'll jump in on that one. And I think that's right. Although I think we're further along than we perhaps realise. And I think one thing we heard very clearly in the task force report, we asked people to think about what their workforce would look like in 10 years. And what we heard loud and clear is that you won't have, the sort of traditional financial services professional and then the digital and tech and IT people in the bank or the insurance company or wherever. It would be a blended role and people would have a bit of everything. And I agree with Tanuj that this is about the process and the tasks within jobs being automated, but not the people. And with that comes different expectations. So if some part of your role has been automated, there's likely to be a lot more requirement for you to be data analytics skilled, because the one thing about technology, it creates vast amounts of data and we have to understand that and be able to use that. So although you might not have to do a bit of your role because it's been automated, you will then have to understand what that data is telling you. So this is how the roles are changing, the new opportunities come up. And I think your point about too much training for specific roles, I think in some ways, yes, we'll move away from that. I don't think we'll move completely away from that, but I think we will move towards more of a blended professional in the sector. However, I think if we look at the knowledge, skills and behaviours and some of these human capabilities that we've mentioned, we actually train a lot of these already. And, the frameworks that the Chartered Institutes have, some of the other professional development bodies and universities do produce, we already train and teach these skills, but I don't think we're very explicit about it. And when I met with a group of vice chancellors at universities saying these are the skills we need, they were very clear saying, well, we already teach these, but we don't explain it in that way. We don't accredit it in that way. We don't assess the impact you would have in the workplace by these more human or behavioural or capabilities skills in the workplace. So I think actually it's already in there. We already have it built into our work. And I think that's one strength of the UK. We are actually very kind of generalist in a way in a lot of our university education. You learn technical skills, but you also learn a lot of application of that and behaviours. But we're not necessarily very good at stating that we've taught someone that, or they're trained, or they're capable in that, and then measuring the impact in the workplace. So I don't think we're very far away from it. It's more just about, I think, being more explicit about how people are learning those skills through different routes and courses and professional development.
So
Can I just add? Oh, sorry.
Yeah. Tanuj, do you want to come in? Maybe Tanuj, then Sian.
I will just add one point to what Claire said. Completely agree with everything. Many of those skills exist. I think it's about recognizing and rewarding it, and that's where the idea of sort of building a learning culture and rewarding and recognizing it comes in, because fundamental to this is this mindset of lifetime and continual learning. So the more we are able to link in the cultural aspects of rewarding it and telling it in the context of the overall sort of future needs, I think we are going to be able to make them stick better and longer.
Yeah, Sian, I think you wanted to come in as well.
Yeah, no, I was just going to. I mean, Claire made the point earlier about the leadership and management side of things, and I think that is very right. I think there is something slightly odd about I think this is a peculiarly British attitude towards this idea that the talented amateur, that actually if you're genetically able to do something, then that's what should be the case, as opposed to maybe more the Singaporean or the German model of, no, actually, if you want a lot of people to have skills of a certain type, you've actually got to train them to do that sort of thing. So, but do you feel again, Claire, that there's a lot of that going on actually? I mean, I've had I suppose I've had a few spurts at it, is probably the best way that I put it. I'm not sure it's been systematic in my career development, but if you said, have I picked up quite a lot of the skills that you probably would build into a sort of a program of leadership or management, I probably have. Is financial services behind on that somehow, or is this just a generic problem that we have across our sort of society?
I don't know. I'm quite a data person. I don't have the exact data on that, but my sense is I don't think financial services is behind on it compared to other parts of the UK economy. And I think developing leadership and management is just a challenge for every sector. And I agree with you that, because you're good at your job doesn't mean you're a good manager. And quite often those two, we sort of seem to put them together. There is a skill in leadership and management. And I think that has to flow from the top all the way through the organisation. And particularly now that there's a lot of conversations about diversity, inclusion and progression, the role of managers in that is absolutely crucial. And how we set the culture of an organisation depends on managers. So I think it's incredibly important. I do think there's perhaps a imbalance in the investment in training and learning at a management level across companies, and that's something we found from the task force. We know that people like the Social Mobility Commission have identified this, and it was when with the task force, we did a lot of work around the country. It wasn't a London-centred task force, it was a UK task force. And we did find that there was quite a lot of surprise at the data around spend on training, that financial services is one of the lowest spend per head on training of any sector. And I think people were quite shocked by that. And I had one board member of a very large firm saying, oh, we sent our whole management team to Singularity University in California for a week. We do loads on training, but it's not throughout the company. And I think that was one of the really stark findings. Now, I'm not saying that that the actual cash figure that's spent on training is something we should try and chase. I think it's an indicator. It doesn't say about the effectiveness of that training, but I do think it's a symptom perhaps of the focus in this financial services has had to have in the last 10 years or so on compliance, senior managers regime, a lot of regulation, a lot of change, a lot of processes and systems. And has there been the space for that development of capabilities and leadership and management on things that aren't compliance or mandated training? So I think there is a lot of that going on. I don't think it's as widespread as it perhaps could or should be, and I think we need to look at that investment going forward to make sure we have the leaders and managers for the future. And just one thing I'll kind of put in there, that financial services is a very highly skilled sector. 60% of the roles in the industry are in professional or above roles, and the rest of the economy is only 45%. And that figure is only going to grow for financial services. So we are a very top heavy and bottom heavy industry. We've got 25% of our roles are in admin and clerical roles, compared to 10% across the rest of the economy. So we are very much an hourglass in terms of highly skilled and low skilled roles. That highly skilled bunch is going to get bigger. So we do need to invest in those leadership and management skills and those professional capabilities for the future success.
I think the other thing that has always fascinated me is about financial services as well is, I don't know, if you think about the established professions, you know, being a doctor or being a lawyer, whatever, this idea that you were trained once and then that's fine, you know, is extraordinary, isn't it? That, you know, I did a training course once, and actually it was about health and safety is normally the training course that everybody remembers doing, and then you know, actually I've been working in the sector for 30 years or whatever, but I don't need any more training. You know, I think there's a bit of a peculiar thing about financial services, this idea of continuous learning that is just inherent in, you know, well, certainly in the professions, but would be inherent maybe in, I don't know, in food manufacturing. I mean, obviously, if you were still manufacturing food the way that you did even 5 years ago, probably you'd be well behind the, you know, behind the curve. So I think that idea of not just the employer having to train you, but this idea that you are also somebody that is an individual professional in the sector, and therefore you also should want to keep your knowledge and skills up to date. I think that, you know, there's more work we can do on that in financial services. I think definitely.
I think that is a crucial point that often gets lost in debates about skills. You know, we talk about you know, what can the Institute for Apprenticeships do, or what's the role of the employer, or what's the role of you know, this part of the education and skills system that we have. But actually, the key role, you're right, is played by the individual. And you know, the work that we do as professional bodies, as employers, you know, as the commission, and so on, we're there supporting individuals as learners, as professionals, as practitioners. We can't force anybody to learn. We can't stuff knowledge down their throats. You know, all we're doing is providing a supportive environment. Which kind of brings me on to one of the points I wanted to talk about was there's been a lot of thought given to what's often called sort of meta skills recently. So these are the I guess best defined as the sort of higher order skills that create and support kind of modern adaptive learners, and help them succeed in whatever context the future brings for them and their role and their organization. So I mean, what meta skills would you single out? I mean, Tanuja, I know when we spoke earlier, you talked about you know, sort of adaptability and the ability to manage through change being a particularly important one. I think this kind of comes back to what we've been talking about too, about you know, what are some of those key 10 future skills. Those the questions come up about that, sort of asking what are the 10. Not sure we can definitively say these are the 10 skills everybody needs, but again, would you maybe like to reflect on this idea of kind of meta skills and some of those key skills that everybody needs to have in order to be strong and adaptive learners?
It's a very good question, and when we did a piece of work on what are going to be the leadership skills that will be needed in leaders of tomorrow, the number one skill that came up, so empirical, we interviewed loads of people, looked at research, was managing ambiguity. Now, I remember before this crisis, speaking about managing ambiguity being the number one skill we'll go after in leaders, and I had some very unimpressed colleagues in the company, right? Because how inspiring is managing ambiguity? You should talk about strategic thinking or commercial orientation. And we said that our research says that this idea of being able to lead in an ambiguous way, in a world which is very ambiguous, is going to be something that is going to differentiate leaders from tomorrow. And we've all sort of seen the last couple of months, COVID, and one thing that's really become very clear is leaders just having the knowledge is not going to be the kind of leadership we need for the future. And it's a big change, right? And I talk about leaders of my generation having to unlearn the leadership constructs that we grew up under and not being embarrassed to be open about it, because knowledge is now completely democratized, right? So in banking, it was that apprentice mindset, right? You start, you learn, the boss had all the answers, had the knowledge. Everything we talk about maker checker. So the nomenclature is very driven by the leader having the knowledge. The world's changed. Knowledge is very easily accessible, the role of technology, and what you need the leaders to have is be inclusive leaders, be able to build and actually nurture diverse teams, show vulnerability, right? You can't build a learning culture till you have leaders who stand up and say, I don't have all the answers. I can say for myself, those are not the leaders I grew up under who didn't have all the answers. Yeah. So we are talking a lot about vulnerability, inclusion, adaptability, celebrating learning. How many banks do we know of where that have recognized learners as opposed to the last big deal that was done? Last month we had our chief executive sent letters to 15 top learners for the month of June. They got a letter which says, our data suggests you've been a top learner, not just you've done a great deal or, you've done a big transaction or you have acquired X more customers. We are celebrating the fact that you're a great learner. So I think, to me, those are the meta skills. And I think that does require a huge amount of work. Like Claire, I think it's not specifically a financial services challenge. I think it's true for other sectors as well. But in financial services, it requires an investment in learning, skill development, and a cultural shift if we are to support everything else that we have spoken about today.
And Sean and Claire, I mean, are you seeing that cultural shift kind of take place? I mean, Sean, within perhaps insurance, or Claire more broadly, perhaps also thinking about your previous role within the City of London, have you kind of seen shifts in leadership and in the culture around leadership and the culture around education and training?
I think people are genuinely beginning to see the difference, if you know what I mean, or they're beginning to really think about what does that mean, because there are a few examples of leaders who maybe are leading in a rather different way and probably wouldn't even talk about leading. They would probably talk about galvanizing or facilitating, or inclusion particularly is something that people are beginning to see the difference between what does that look like if somebody is genuinely inclusive leader or somebody is not. So, but I think human beings naturally look for, when we talk about role models, I mean, that tends to get boxed into a particular thing, but I think human beings like to see it happening, and then they go, okay, so we had this old way and we know that sort of worked, but this does look better because the challenge, as I think, particularly if you are in human resources, must be you've got to get some of these people there first, and then the skeptical will begin to go, okay, that's actually working really well. I think one thing we have absolutely got to tackle in financial services, and it may be the same in technology, I don't know, but greed, oh my God. I mean, if I read about one more greedy CEO getting paid, $50 million when their average salary in their company is like 30 grand, I just, that you can talk about all these other things, but if we're talking inclusion, well, then we are all in this together, and you cannot have that massive polarization of earnings, and because all it is really saying is, scrabble your way to the top and you get the big bucks, and it doesn't matter how you get there. And if you do all this other stuff, it's lovely, HR will be very proud of you, but fundamentally that's what matters, right? So if we don't if we don't create more equanimity over reward, and we reward, as you so rightly say, reward the right behaviors, not the wrong behaviors, I think that we've got some hideous stuff still going on in financial services around that, and that will undermine. The thing is, human beings are very skeptical, really, and if you say one thing but you're still definitely doing something else, people will only pay lip service to fundamental change. So I think I would certainly plead, given that we've got one big company with us, it's that big corporate culture around reward has just got to get seriously addressed.
I think some of that is changing, Sian. I get this. I do sort of talking with leaders in some of the companies that we work with. I do get the sense that's changing. And what I've been struck by is in the last few months with the COVID coming at us unexpected, is how mindful the leaders have been about the response of the sector and how that will be viewed. Now there is some self-interest in that and sort of reputational risk and outcomes, but being very mindful that financial services will be looked at very carefully in how it responds, how it treats customers. And I don't think we've even seen the tip of the iceberg in terms of financial challenge that's going to be coming our way, with job losses and personal debt, insurance claims coming through, and I think there's a lot that's going to come out. And I know some leaders have been very, very careful about how their firms are supporting people, not only customers but also workforce, because some of the biggest advocates for firms are their own workers. And I do sort of see that shift, and firms have been very clear that it's their workforce has got them through this crisis. Everyone pulling together has made it happen, and they realise the importance of that. And I'm struck by the fact that we've established, we've only been around for 2 months as an actual organisation. The Skills Commission has been created to address the issue of future skills, and saying we can't recruit our way out of this crisis and battle each other for talent. We have to work together to grow the pool for everybody. And we've got firms joining and really working on this with us and saying it's a longer term challenge and we need to collaborate to make it happen. So I think the mindset shift is happening within the sector. I just wanted to come back on your meta skills, because my one, I agree with Tanuj's suggestions, but my one is curiosity, because I think that is the thing that constantly moves us forward and moves the innovation forward. So constantly asking those questions: what does this mean? How can we do it better? Why can we do it differently? Why has that happened? So my meta skill is curiosity, and I'm constantly trying to be better at that myself and learn, because you're right that this is a learning journey for individuals. And what we found in the task force was that individuals are very keen to learn. They don't always know where they need to put their energy in terms of next skills to learn, which is why as the Commission we're creating a framework that'll set out those future skills and where skills needs to evolve, and then working with people like the charter bodies and others to try and embed that training and development into the sector.
I mean, it does seem to me it's kind of our responsibility as whether professional bodies, employers, people involved in the skills system to make those, to make it as easy as possible for somebody who is curious and wants to develop their skill to do that. But very often skills systems and education and training systems, whether that's within an institution or whether it's further education, higher education, wherever it might be, even dare I say it within professional bodies, sometimes we make it too difficult. We put too many barriers in the way. That's why I was quite intrigued by Tanuja. You talked about the new AI sort of powered LMS system I expect you have to try and make it sort of really easy for people to find the next piece of learning, and using that Netflix idea of, you know, people like you have been interested in doing these courses or watching these videos or whatever it might be. In fact, I mean, what that just links to one of the questions we've got coming through. I think we touched on this a bit earlier, but it talks around should we talk about how AI enhances efficiency rather than replaces jobs? I think we might have covered that one earlier, actually, did we? I think.
Yeah, and that's I think we all sort of agreed in our own ways that that is true. What AI does is it targets processes and parts of a role and a job, as opposed to taking it over fully. And I think we need to use it like that. I think the idea of using AI technology in democratizing learning is a really, really powerful one. And the idea that it plays to the curiosity point, plays to Sean's point around changing the culture. It is trying to do it in bite-sized chunks in ways which is more accessible, and you can do it in your own pace, in your own time, I think does change the game significantly. And also the way we are consuming content in our personal life, how do we ensure that people get the same kind of opportunity when they are consuming content in their professional lives? So I think it's been, I mean, I'll give a statistic. In just the first quarter of this year, our consumption of digital skills was 60%, our consumption of digital learning was 60% more than it was whole of last year. And within a month of launching the new platform, we had 25,000 users on it within a month, 69% of whom are repeat users. So 69% are people who are not just playing around with the system, they are going after specific sort of courses, which tells you that the appetite is there, which tells you that if it's made accessible in a way which is sort of future focused, which is customized to individuals, that there is a real appetite within individuals to learn and grow.
Which is probably a good point so we're almost out of time. So probably a good note on which to kind of bring our discussion to a conclusion, because I would absolutely agree there is a real appetite out there. Certainly we see it from our members and from the banks that we engage with, real appetite to learn, and certainly real appetite from firms to augment, to use the word I'm going to use from now on, to augment their colleagues' skills. That somehow we don't quite yet seem to have brought the two together on a truly systemic basis, which is where the role of the new Financial Services Skills Commission will hopefully, you're 2 months into it only, but maybe by the end of the next month we'll have got there and it'll be job done, or it might take a wee bit longer. And as you know, the Chartered Body Alliance and others are very much with you on the journey, and we'll do our best to help Claire. But on behalf of the Chartered Body Alliance and all those who have logged on today, and then those who will log on later to catch up with this, Tanuj, Sean, Claire, thank you so much for your time, your expertise, and for sharing your thoughts with us. I certainly feel my knowledge and capability in this area has been augmented over the last hour, and I've really enjoyed a very sort of thoughtful and fruitful discussion. So thank you, and have a great rest of the day. Bye bye.
Thank you very much. Bye.
Very nice to meet you.